Is this where I sing? Hey, I can.
Courtney,
Yes.
Oh, she's muted.
you're muted.
It shows me that I'm not muted. Am I still muted?
I can hear you, Courtney. I don't know.
Hey, Matt, glad you're here.
I can hear you too.
Well, should I go ahead and get started? Can everyone hear me?
I don't think they've officially started the meeting.
I'm stressed.
They'll introduce you. So, and they'll just say your the host is, and then you.
You're good.
You got this. Oh, there's Maria.
Courtney, we're going to come back to you, sweetie. Hopefully we'll get that sound figured out. 2.2, presentation of service certificates for the month of June.
Julie Schofield, Access Specialist, Southern Oaks, 30 years. Wow, give her a big hand. That's really good. Kara Riddle, Librarian, Community Libraries, 10 years. Brandon Johnston, Access Manager 1, Edmond, 10 years. Judith Matthews, Librarian, Special Collections and Research, 5 years. Chelsea Booman, Librarian, Downtown, 5 years. And George Taco, Engagement Manager, Midwest City, 5 years. Let's give our recipients a big hand. Thank you. Do we have sound yet for Courtney? Not yet. Okay, we're going to keep going. All right, 3.1, approval of consent docket items 3.1 to 3.5. I'll entertain a motion. Okay, motion made by Dennis, seconded by, hey, Rachel. It's hard to tell people in their masks, sorry. Second by Rachel. Any items you need to pull for separate consideration? Any questions? Okay, Maria, call roll.
Alford. Anthony. Yes. Garrett. Yes. Johnson. Yes. Leslie. Yes. Mon. McDaniel.
Yes.
Patel.
Yes.
Rubio. Yes. Shockley. Smith.
Yes.
Tolan. Tucker. Yes. Woodruff. Kane.
Yes. Thank you. Ann, should I try the sound again? Not yet? Okay. Our number 4, our committee reports, and I just want to make sure, is it okay with everyone if we flip the order and do our finance committee report first ahead of our AMP committee report? Okay, so 4.2, discussion, consideration, possible action, report and recommendations from finance committee. So this is a motion coming out of committee. It's so we don't need to make another motion here, and I'll turn it over to Dennis.
Thank you. The Finance Committee met last week, and we're recommending the adoption of a preliminary budget that is about $1.5 million less than last year's budget, which Cherise will explain here shortly. For the newer members of the commission, we operate on a state and county federal fiscal, not federal, fiscal year, which runs from July 1st to June 30th. So this is a fiscal year 22 budget, meaning it ends June 30th of next year. Now, every taxing jurisdiction, for lack of a better term, has to adopt a budget before the beginning of the fiscal year. This is a preliminary budget, which we adopt each June, because the county has not given us the how much money, the amount of money. And so that's how government works, okay? And so we'll be coming back to you in August with a final budget after the county has those numbers. Sometimes it's, one time in my memory, it slipped to September, but usually it's in August when we adopt the final budget. And there will be some minor changes. There always are between this preliminary budget and the final budget. So Sharice, I always get these titles messed up. Deputy Executive Director for Finance.
Yes.
Okay, got it right.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Come on up, Sharice. I know you have something you want to show the group as a good finance person.
Right. Made my font bigger this time so I could
Nice.
see when it started up here.
Uh-huh.
And we're just gonna put the, can you read that? That's still pretty small, isn't it?
Yeah, Maria can make it bigger. Yeah.
Good afternoon. What you have in your packet, I gave you 3 documents in your packet. I have you the preliminary budget that we'll be asking you to approve today. In addition, I gave you a supplementary detailed budget that rolls up all of the information from all of the locations and all the departments by location, and then again by account. So you have all the details and more that you want to see to back that up. And then last year we presented some supplementary information that gave you some background and some terminology and history of all of the various budget items, the high-level budget items. And I updated that this year, just knowing we had new commissioners, and that might be useful to you as well. So we'll go through the 12-page, I think, budget that you'll be approving. But then after that, if you have questions on any of the information I provided, feel free to ask questions. So let's see. I write notes and I never read them. Okay, so we'll start with the first page in the revenue budget, section 1 of that document. And section 1 has pages 3 and 4 that provide you some overview, but we're going to start on page 5, which is the real nuts and bolts of everything. And in the first column, you'll see, first column is what we're asking you to review and approve today. The second column compares that to the prior year budget. The third column is the estimate of actual. So like Dennis said, we won't complete our year end till June 30th, and we won't have those numbers ready till sometime in July or early August for our final numbers. So in the final budget, we'll have the actual expenses and revenues in that column. Right now, that's just an estimate. And then your last columns there, just showing you the changes from budget to budget and budget to actual from last year. So I'll be going over that first column here. So the first section is the ad valorem tax. And as Dennis said, we get the county prepares and provides us with the assessment of all property values sometime in August or September, and that will be the basis for our final budget. So for now, in the last 2 years, we've taken a very conservative approach and a zero-based budget. So you can see our numbers for ad valorem tax are exactly the same as the 2021 budget. We have that 10% reserve. We set aside 10% every year because we know that not all taxpayers are going to pay in the year assessed. So we set aside 10%. So that gets us to the 37 million in the first section. In the second section, that's a projected miscellaneous income. That is a state aid we get from state funding, and we budget that at 90% each year. That puts us at the 164,000. And then fines, we typically budget that at 90% from the prior year, but knowing that we are going fine-free and knowing that we also have been fine-free for children's materials already, we have kind of estimated that extremely low at 30,000 just to absorb the impact of those changes. Yeah, for the materials and those things that will still have retained fines. Yeah, and that we don't have good numbers on what that might be, so 30,000 is kind of a conservative number. We'll see. We'll have better information going forward for next year. And then in the next section, so that gets us with 194,000 there. In the next section, we have our, and you can see that's the projected carryover from prior years. So if you compare that to our estimate of actuals, that's exactly what we have received this year, is what we include in our budget this year. So at the time we prepared the preliminary budget, I estimated the current taxes collected into the reserve for this year to be 1.6 million, probably be more like 1.8 million when we get to the final. And then we have back year taxes. So back year taxes would be any taxes that we collect on years 2020 and previous. And I estimated that at 1.4 at that time, and that'll probably be just a shade higher than that as well. Our copy fees, you can see, have dropped significantly just because we were closed for a bigger portion of the year and less activity system-wide for those activities. So, yes. Uh-huh. Yes.
Can we think about that as basically prior year's 10% reserve for the resources? The money that's coming in, took out of the budget of prior years, you're now receiving it, that's what's coming.
Yeah, so anything that we received this year that was over and above our 90% was recorded as that into the reserve, and back year is anything year for years prior. So that's actually what we will collect this year that we budget in the subsequent year.
So can I think about it, since budget of 3.7, where you're going from prior years to so we received roughly 3 of that 3.7 coming into the budget.
Correct.
Or that's the estimate.
Right. Yeah, it'll be higher than that. That's what we had collected. Well, I added some trying to estimate what we would collect from March, April time when we started this budget for the end of the year. And I think when I looked at it last, we've collected about 1.8 million in the current year into the reserve. And for the back year taxes, I think it's 1.55. What we collected today. So those will both go up, and those will be actual numbers when we get to the final budget. Okay. Talked about copy fees, investment income. Of course, we've collected much less than we had budgeted from prior year. And then miscellaneous income is reimbursements and various items that we've collected this year that we'll budget for next year. Also, we have the lapsed current year appropriation. So that is not a revenue, a new source of income, but that is budgeted expenditures that we did not spend this year that are now available for spending next year. Trying to rush me. Everybody's with you, I'm sure. So when we looked at that, and of course, we'll have firm numbers for that when we get to final, and that looks like it might just go up as well. We haven't finished our expenditures for the year until we get to probably mid-July. We won't know what that number is, but last I looked, that could go as high as 8 million. So we'll see. I have 2 more payrolls to process this month. So that gets us to our 47,762,000 in budgeted revenue sources. We have our prior year reserve. Again, that's not a new source of funds. That is funds that we set aside in our budget last year, and those are still available for capital projects and major expenditures going forward. And we'll go over the reserve schedule last. But that source this year is 21 million. That gives us a total projected available for budget at 68,853. Any questions on the revenue budget? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we have that book sale, right?
Yes.
Sometimes we need to go back into our.
No. That goes into special funds. So like if we get a grant, same thing, those funds come through and they're, so back up. The revenue earned at book sale goes to the Friends of the Library. They hold those funds in their accounts. So we don't have access to those unless we ask for them. So we'll process a grant usually twice a year. where we go to the Friends and ask for a variety of things. They've funded summer reading programs, they funded vehicle purchases, they funded, I can probably think of more than I can. Lots of things.
I noticed that there's a big carpet over here, the year past, we purchased.
Yep.
We bought books with a budget. We bought books.
Lots of things, yeah. And they've supported some staff initiatives and different projects throughout the years. But we have to go to them every year or every twice a year and request those as a grant. When those funds come into the system, they're set aside in a fund designated for that purpose. And if we don't use it for that purpose, we either cut a check and send it back to the Friends, or we go to them and say, hey, we were $10,000 under what we expected. Can we use this fund for a new purpose? So. What do we do with them? You would see those on the surplus report, and we would sell those. Usually most items like IT equipment and the vehicles we sell, but some of the surplus items are donated to other nonprofits. Yeah, that would be in gains and losses on the sale of fixed assets, and that's in that miscellaneous income. So part of that 77,000 is all the equipment that Ann sells to IT. Anything else? Okay. Moving on, page. And again, like I did with, let's see, the revenue budget, on the expense budget, I've given you some overview pages, but we'll skip straight to the meat again on page 7 and 8. And we'll go over that. So salary and wages is our largest category of expenses. As you would expect, it constitutes about 60% of our budgeted expenses every year. This year, we're seeing a decrease of approximately 2.8%. And you can see in salaries and wages, that's about $568,000. The bigger portion of that is in 2021, we had that 27th payroll. So every 11 years, when you pay every 2 weeks, you end up with an extra payroll in a year. And you'll see that in the reserve schedule too, where we set aside a reserve. So last year we pulled that 700,000 in, spent that 700,000 on additional payroll. So our payroll for 2021 is high, making this back to kind of where we were before with 3%. So that budget includes the 3% prorated merit increase and 2 less positions. So we did have, if you look at the FTE schedule, it's on that salaries and wages detail page. You can see that we have 2 fewer FTE. We had 2 security officers retire, and those are being replaced with contract services. So the expense is still there, it's just in a different place. Benefits includes a 3% increase in our health insurance premiums, and then a lot of the other smaller benefits showed decreases. In the retirement category, we have our defined contribution plan, which we budget at 10% of wages for eligible participants. And then for the defined contribution plan, I budgeted $750,000. Again, in August, we get the actuarial report that tells us what we need to contribute to our plan to keep it solid. I don't know what that is yet. I estimated high this year just because we've had so much activity in the pension plan. So that may come down when we get to the final budget. Okay. Any questions on wages? No. Okay. So then the next category is our contractual services. You can see there all of the accounts and the variances. I had a few that I would talk about. Let's see. Overall, the categories increased by 2.19%. Some of the significant changes are on the insurance. We had an increase of 23% for the building, property, and auto insurance. The premiums showed a slight increase, but the biggest increase there is that we have raised the property values to be more in line with to be more in line with being fully insured in that regard. We had let our property values kind of slip. And so we're updating those over the next 2 years to be more in line with what we would expect in for replacement of those properties if needed. Right. Let's see, what else did we have? It kind of had a big swing. Janitorial service, we showed a 13% decrease. If you remember last year when we were budgeting at this time, we were really uncertain about what we needed for COVID. So we kind of dumped some extra funds in there to make sure we were covered. Now we kind of know what we need in the upcoming year, and it's much less. We didn't spend all of that either, but we know that it's going to be less this year. So that is reflected in that 13% decrease. And then the travel registration and training has increased over 2021. It's actually more in line with 2020, because in 2021, we knew that we would not be going to conferences or doing any of those activities. So we're kind of returning back to a normal level of activity. Any other questions on this section? Okay.
On the security services
Mm-hmm.
that you have to share now, is that because you're transferring it to those positions to contract?
Yeah, we're doing that. And I think we are going through a security review. We've hired consultants come in and do a security review right now. So we have some additional funds in there so that we can act on any recommendations they come with. We'll have that completed before the final review. So the final budget will have more trued up numbers as well. Certainly. Okay, do we move on to the next page? Thank you, you're ahead of me. Okay. So here we have the commodities, larger or smaller dollar amounts here, but we had some increases in the printing and printing supplies. Most of that is to accommodate turning our calendar into a magazine format. So making sure we cover those costs. The programming budget increased 20%. Some of that is, again, returning to kind of a normal level of activity. And then we have a total commodity showing an increase of 7.82%. Any question on commodities or why it's called commodities to begin with?
Just keep going.
Okay. We have books and materials. And you see that's kind of flat for now. What we do when we budget books and materials, we budget that at 15% of the budget. So when we have, and because we're budgeting flat, it also looks flat. When we get to our final budget, we'll adjust that to be 15% of the final budget. And that covers all of our, not only our physical materials, but that's e-materials and databases and all things collection. We have capital outlays. Some of the things that are included in the capital outlays, and you have detail of that in that page 7 or 8. But we've got the Belle Isle Library, FF&E, and IT. We have a separate secondary library kiosk. We have, I have no idea where that's going to go yet. We got to get the first one in and see how that goes and see what kind of use we see. But I think all locations are still being considered at this time. We have additional asset access controls. We've been working on that for the last year or two, changing out all of our access control lock systems throughout all the buildings. We have FF&E expenses for renovations at Choctaw and War Acres and Wright. We have makerspace funds and a story walk for Bethany. We have AV equipment for Del City, and then security replacements throughout the system. We also have additional projects include in that second line is ADA upgrades for the community libraries. We have wayfinding signage, been working on that for a little bit over a year. So that should come to fruition in our upcoming years throughout several libraries. We have centennial editions at Ralph Ellison and upgraded signage at Luther. And that hits all the expenses. Any questions on any of the expenses? Okay. All right, so we can go to the reserve schedule. Oh, yeah, and you can see there at the end, we have $1 million that typically we're contributing $1 million a year to the reserves. And so that confirmation is shown there. That brings our total reserves up to 22 million, which is shown here. So if you look at the final column here, that's our 2021, 2022 proposed reserve schedule. So our $21 million balance from last year, plus our $1 million contribution for 2022 to bring it to the 22 million. We have $8 million that we set aside for cash reserves. That is to help us cash flow when we receive most of our income in the December through March area. So that carries us to the first part of the fiscal year while we're waiting on those ad valorem receipts. And then you see that reserve for extra payday. So that's approximately 1/11 that we reserve every year until we get to that 11th year. And then here at the bottom, what we have identified here in these items come from that long-range plan. The long-range plan that you guys approved earlier in the year. We detail out specifically 4 years of activity in the reserve schedule, and then the 6 years beyond the 4 years are shown in the future projects. And you can see the different libraries impacted there. And that's our 22,091,000. Any questions on anything in the reserve schedule or anything throughout all of the documents you had to review?
Okay, thank you, Sharice.
No problem.
Okay, Maria,
you.
call roll.
Harris. Yes. Johnson. Leslie. Yes. Vaughn. McDaniel.
Yes.
Patel.
Yes.
Rubio. Gambler.
Yes.
Shockley. Smith. Yes. Solon. Tucker. Yes. Woodruff. Zeke. Yes. Kane.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Sharice, for a great explanation. Let's go back to 4.1, discussion, consideration, and possible action, recommendations from Administrative Personnel Committee. Once again, this is coming from committee, so that's the motion. I'm going to call on the chair of the committee, Tracy.
So the A&P committee met also on June 1st, along with the finance committee. And our job, our task was to consider recommendations, possible actions to make revisions to our policy manual and handbook to bring us up to date to deal with our current trends. And the recommendations that were requested of us was to the manual. These are not the only ones we'll be doing this year, but these are the ones that we had done so far. We looked at SH 510, that's discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. We made some revisions to, they were recommending revisions to SH 540, that's workers' compensation. SH 611, unexpected closures, and SH 640, safety. Kelly Hoffman, the Director of Human Resources, gave a brief overview to us, and she also, before I bring her up here, she also said that all of the policy revisions had been reviewed by our local library attorneys, as well as the senior management, as well as the leadership team and the safety committee team. And so, is Kelly here? Oh, that's Kelly, come on.
On page 2 of the budget, I see maybe there's a sentence there in that last paragraph that was not intended to be written that way. Second sentence there says, all sorts of unlawful retaliation are protected. I don't think that's what we was on the same thing, but I don't think it's meant to say that retaliation is protected. Typically, I kind of figure out what it means to say that.
Right.
Maybe
Prohibited instead of protected?
Yes, prohibited. We can make that correct.
Do you accept that change as
Absolutely.
chair? Okay. we did that just so we could see if you're reading, Beth. Because you are the one that keeps us correct.
I
Thank you.
was reading too.
Oh, thank you. And Judy did too.
In the 600 unexpected closures on the first page, under policy, the second line references library system, and it's not noted to take out system. And that's, it's a housekeeping thing, because that's what you're doing all the way through.
Got it.
It's taking out the word system, so that needs to come out.
Judy, that was on page 2.
Well, no, it's on page 1,
Oh, page 1.
but under policy,
Okay.
the second line. However, there are extraordinary circumstances warrant the library system refers to that, so it should be the library.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Okay.
I can't imagine how anybody missed that. It's in there every time.
Page 2, the third paragraph, the first sentence. Textual characteristics is also. Then sort of,
Page 2, that first line, Craig? Okay. Is that correct, Tracy?
Yes.
Prohibited, not protected?
Yes.
Okay. Maria, did you get that? Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Okay,
If you have 14 editors.
it's awesome. That means people are reading the packets. This is a good thing. Anything else you want to say, Tracy?
No, is Kelly not here?
No.
Okay, Larry, do you have anything to say?
No, sir.
Okay. No.
Okay,
Well, I would
questions?
say this, so the revisions that we did make, some of them were old and need to be updated. And for example, the closure, God knows we had some policies put in place last year for the closures. And so we made it, we beefed up the policies to make sure we can do that again and be ready when next time it happens.
And we appreciate all the work that Judy's committee's been doing on policy and your AMP's been doing on the personnel policies. And that's a lot of work just to keep those current. So thank you so much for your work, Tracy.
Okay.
Any other questions before you, oh, I'm sorry, Tracy?
I think that's why we're finding the so if we get to a new copy to kind of do a final review on, or if we get that, if I can clean it myself and look at it, edit it, I think that's better. Probably in draft.
So do you want to hold the vote till the next meeting? No.
No.
Oh,
Actually, we listened to what you said. So when future policy comes to you, you will get both a clean copy and the edited copy so that you can see the differences, but it'll be clean for you to read.
nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great
So-
suggestion.
So when you get future drafts of policy, it will come in both formats.
That's awesome. That'll be easier. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Maria, call roll. Thank you, Tracy.
Anthony? Harris? Johnson? Leslie? Mon? McDaniel?
Yes.
Patel?
Yes.
Rubio? Gambler? Shockley? Smith? Yes. Solon? Tucker? Yes. Woodruff? Zeke? Yes. Payne?
Yes. Thank you, everybody. 4.3, discussion, consideration, possible action, executive committee minutes from June 9th. Any questions? Okay, those stand. 5.1, library usage report. Larry.
Yes, this is another, I think the technical term is wonky month. It's going to be a while before we get back into some sort of normal rhythm of activity so that we can honestly look and say, this is closer back to normal. A couple of things I will point out is, in spite of the fact that we've had our issues with COVID and other things for the fiscal year, we are only 11% down in circulation from where we were, which I think is doing pretty well. considering that we were closed for so much time and we weren't able to interact with a lot of people during that time. We're getting closer back to normal. We still have a lot of these numbers that we're hoping come back through the normal use. We switched over May 1st to sit and stay, which has prompted more people to come in the facilities. And we're seeing a steady increase in the amount of computer usage, Wi-Fi connections, circulation, all the activities that come with that attendance being increased. And we're hoping that as more and more people see that, more and more people engage with that, we will start seeing those numbers going back up closer to where they were in 2019. So we're continuing to track those. So all of the numbers that are related to some sort of attendance, like program attendance and room reservations and all those things, they're going to be a while before they get back to normal. Yes, ma'am.
In that vein, something kind of caught my attention on the year-to-date report, page 2, on room reservation. In fiscal year 2020, did we have 20,000 room reservations?
Well,
Even if you're talking steady corrals, that's a lot of reservations in 1 year.
and please correct me if I'm wrong, but is that not from the internal booking of the reserve of the rooms, or is that number not quite right? You see, we
That would have ended in June from July 1st of 19. Right.
right. Okay, so
Didn't catch much of
right,
the.
we use the room reservation system ourselves to track that. So some portion of that number is the staff reserving workspaces. How much of that I can check?
Okay, I don't know if that makes a difference. It just kind of jumped out at me. We have 19 locations, 20,000 reservations. Wait a minute. And Wright doesn't reserve it.
No. It also probably means we have too many meetings.
But wasn't you using the space for the staff folks spread out?
Yes, we are using some of the meeting rooms for storage for furniture up until we went to sit and stay. Some of that furniture came out. Some of the meeting rooms are still closed, but some of the meeting rooms are still open. And we also reserve conference rooms and other things that generate a count on that. So we're circulating, well, under normal circumstances, we would be a part of the room reservation count with the activity that we generate in just reserving rooms for meetings and making sure that we've got space for our own meetings. Any other questions with the data? Oh, the other thing I wanted to point out, there was a request to add a month-over-month look. And so we've gone ahead and included that. We're going to be looking at presenting some of the information in some different ways to help give you the widest variety of understanding of looking at these numbers. So if you have ideas about things that you would like for us to feature in those data points, please let us know and we will do our best to accommodate your request. I think that was about it for highlight. Any other questions?
Okay, let's go on to 6.1, Executive Director's Report. You want to highlight some of your report, Larry?
Yes, I want to highlight summer reading. Since I filed my report, actually Tuesday morning, I was a little late getting it in. The numbers for summer reading have gone up pretty well. Last year, we had a total of 7,706 participants for summer reading for the entire summer. We've gone for 2 weeks. We already have 9,160 participants, so we are already way ahead of last year. We have already recorded over 2 million minutes of reading by those 9,160 people. Participants have completed 12,000 reading related activities to earn points. And we already have over 1,000 people who have already read for 10 or more hours. The other good part of that is that we are 24% of our way towards making our annual goal, which is 8 million points. You get 1 point for each minute you read. So we are looking to get to 8 million, and we're about 24% of the way. So we're a fourth of the way through summer reading and about a fourth of the way through the total. The last thing I'll highlight is that last year we were not able to feature teen volunteers in our summer reading program, where we normally have quite a number. This year we actually have 54 teen volunteers that are participating in summer reading with us this year. We have had to work with scheduling, and we've had to identify tasks that the teens could do as part of that support. And the Development and Volunteer Services Office has worked very diligently to try to get as many teen volunteers placed within the system as the system can hold. Let me see if I think that was it for my highlighted comments. We also included a couple of other items for your informational consideration. We've got a document that was created by marketing EPS. I think it's EPS actually. Talking about how to get started with the book club. And we're putting that information out. Book clubs have always been a mainstay of libraries, but because of the COVID and other things, the book clubs have really come back to life in new and different ways. We give you a short overview of some of the suggested professional reading that we're offering to staff and other people, talking about things that are related to summer reading or development of skills and activities that are connected to summer reading. We provided a quick sheet on how to share for commissioners and other people, how you can share on your social media what we're doing with our summer reading campaign, so that we can build that network of relationships. Behind that is a committee inventory report. We have, I think, as you heard me say earlier, we have a lot of meetings. We have a lot of things going on. And we were looking at examining how staff were selected or picked for committees, because sometimes people were getting picked, but their supervisor wasn't aware they'd been picked. And so people show up and say, hey, I've been picked, I need to go, and people didn't know. So in order to ascertain what was happening, we decided to do an inventory of the committees to actually find out exactly how many we had, what the kind of participation rate was in it, so that we can understand better how the staffers are involved in the decision processes of the organization. And we've got the first preliminary set of numbers, which are included in this report. There's going to be a second step where we go back and try to dig down and drill into things like, if you're not able to participate, why? What are some things that we can do to help you in that participation? Some of the things that we discovered are kind of interesting. I won't go through the whole thing, but approximately 25% of our employees are involved in some form of committee or group that is involved with library service. We have 29 active committees at this point, which to me seems a bit much, but we're going to work on that as part of the understanding from this study. About 64% of the library system's different job titles are represented on the committees. So we have a broad swath of different types of positions that are represented in the committees. The one statistic that kind of got my attention, we went through and did an analysis to find out how many frontline staff were involved and how many people that were in supervisory capacity that were involved. And 71% of our committee participation is by manager and supervisor. So we're going to have to work on it.
Is this just for the staff? Directly providing it to me? So that the public can access.
Can you say that again, please? I missed the first part.
I'm getting confused, all this. So how are they relevant to our customers?
How are they relevant? Many of these committees are related to services. For example, we've got a committee that deals with access services and management. There's another group that deals with summer reading. There's another group that deals with different aspects of service that we're responsible for in terms of providing through the course of the year. Some of these are transient committees. Some of these are permanent committees. But all of these committees are put together so that we have input from staff in terms of the processes of how the different aspects of the library work. They're involved in the circulation or the access side. We have committees for the engagement side, where that's the part where we go out and engage with people in the field. All of these committees are connected in some form or way of how the library operates or provides service.
So you got groups within the library system that are staff.
I'm sorry?
You have the data from the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
And they come and use the services in that. See how well they are doing. We've got groups of staff members who analyze that.
No, that's what I, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That, to me, it seems like all the staff members should be involved in doing their job.
They are involved in doing their jobs, but they also have a role in making some of the decisions about how those jobs are conducted.
One of the things we do on the commission is every commissioner is on at least one committee. And that's how you learn what's going on. And that's how you get input and add ideas and creativity. And the same thing is true of the staff. The more consensus you can get, the better things you're going to run. And the more ideas you can build on. So I'd like to see the frontline participation be higher than it is. And I did realize that sometimes that's taking someone from a certain desk and putting them in a meeting. But that's still part of their job.
And we try to get staff involvement in what happens. It's not a monolith.
They buy in to something that's worked on a lot quicker than something that's shut down.
And we have staff that are experts in different aspects of the service. So it's important to bring in those experts.
Thank you, Larry.
And then the last thing is
I'm
just
sorry.
the earned media.
The what?
The earned media.
Okay.
That's all that was there.
I like that little thank you note from the little kids at Northwest,
Especially the kids.
right? Yeah, that was precious. Let's try and see if we can get Courtney now. Courtney, are you still with us?
I am.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
No. Are you in the building?
No, unfortunately not today.
Well, shoot. Nope, they're shaking their heads no. Courtney, we appreciate you hosting us. I'm sorry it's like this, but that's how technology goes sometimes. But thank you so much for staying here the whole meeting and everything you're doing. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, any comments by commissioners?
I have really enjoyed the media ads, the billboards, all of that.
And on social media, I get a lot of my book suggestions of social media from our librarians that say, have you read this month? I want you to think about reading this. Thanks, Maria. I appreciate that.
And that comes from our social media team. It includes marketing, it includes staff from EPS, it includes staff from Contractual Services, it includes our digital services manager. and I think CIS in terms of communicating that information to the.
Any suggestions for future agendas? Okay, our next meeting is July 15th, 3:30. We'll be right here again. Val Lyle will be our host. And I just want to reiterate again, thank you so much for being here. I know that we're back in person, and that's a little trickier feeling than when we were safe on Zoom. But I appreciate you being here. It takes 14 for a quorum. We have 27 on the commission. So thank you